There are so many things and so many questions that help us to understand more of ourselves so that we're not acting out on autopilot. If you're a part of our journaling challenge this month, you know that self-awareness is the first theme of this week. And that is because I believe it is foundational. For us to live a life that is free and intentional and unapologetic, we have to start with understanding ourselves. I remember a time where this actually became very kind of embarrassingly apparent to me. But I remember that there was a time when I was working as a full-time architect and I was asked to come and speak at this convention. And I didn't really know why. I was like younger on the panel of people, but I just felt really honored and really happy to be there. And I remember I spoke, I kind of like said my part, and we all kind of like said our parts. It was a panel. We all kind of like said our parts. And it went really well. And I remember people were coming up after and they were like, wow, like, you know, Nadine, I really loved your story. Like, it was so good. And, you know, I felt really touched and, you know, all these things. And I was like, what do they mean by story? But I remember that I kept getting those comments like, oh wow, like that was so good. Like your story really impacted me. I know it will help so many people and all of these things. And I was like, I was very confused. I was very confused, so confused. Or I wasn't even conscious of what I said. If you told me to repeat what I said, I wouldn't be able to say it. I had no idea what I was saying. But I was like, okay, like wow, that's like really cool. It's really cool. And then I remember there was this one guy who was kind of like running that part of the event. And he was speaking to the person who had asked me and he was like, wow, you know, like I feel like she'd be really good to speak at this other, our national board meeting that we have. And I remember she had asked me, she's like, you know, Nadine, I feel like you'll be really good at speaking at this event. And I was like, okay, like sure, I could definitely do it. And I remember when I got to the event and I remember looking at the list and seeing like my name was last on the list. Like I was the last person to go up and speak. And I was like, oh my gosh, why did they do this? Why? Like it's supposed to be some like grand finale event. Like, oh my gosh, I felt so, I didn't feel good. And I remember I was like texting my siblings beforehand, just like, okay, I'm like feeling nervous, I'm about to go up, and you know, took a picture of the program and like pray for me and like all these things. And I remember I went up there and I spoke and I felt very in my body. I felt very comfortable there. And then when I got down, that all changed. That all changed. After a meeting and talking to a couple different people, I found myself in the bathroom, in a stall, calling my siblings and sending them voice memos and like, oh my gosh, guys, I am so embarrassed. I am so embarrassed. And they're like, oh my gosh, Nay, what happened? Like, did it go bad? Like, what happened? Did you say something weird? Blah, blah, blah. And stuff. Like, guys, no. Guys, it went amazing. And like, people said they loved it. And people said like, they were so like excited and that they felt like, you know, all these great things and blah, blah, blah. Like, it was just like, oh my gosh, I feel so embarrassed. I feel so embarrassed. And they were like, Nay, that doesn't make sense. And I was like, oh, I guess you're right, but it's a little bit embarrassing, right? And they were like, no, Nay, that doesn't make sense, Like, you're embarrassed that it went well? And I was like, huh, you're right, like, that doesn't make sense. Why am I feeling ashamed and embarrassed that it went well? And that moment, and because that happened, that was a continuous thing that kept happening for me. Something would go well, I would pull away. Something would do really well, I would self-sabotage, you never wanna do that thing again. I was like, okay, Nay, there's a couple things happening here. One, it is hard for you to receive a compliment. It's very hard for you to receive a compliment. Nay, when someone compliments you, you kind of feel like there's a little bit of shame there and you kind of want to pull away from that. All right, that's something there. Number two, you have a lot of passion. Girl, you have a lot of passion. But sometimes you do not realize the passion that you might be exuding. And guys, can I just tell you, that was one of the biggest parts for me for YouTube. I'm gonna be completely honest. I didn't know. It is so different to kind of just be talking to somebody. You're talking to them, there's a person here, a person is talking, and you don't ever get to see the reflection of yourself back. Oh my goodness, there is such a difference when you are actually talking, expressing all of you, seeing all of you, and then now you have to go back, edit that video, see every single move you've done, every single thing. You're seeing a mirror back of yourself, and now you're presenting it to people. It's like, oh my gosh, like, especially if you are someone who has struggled with self-acceptance or self-awareness or not quite knowing how you come off to people, it can be shocking. It can be shocking. So when somebody came and they said, wow, Nay, you have so much passion, you blah, 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 and I didn't realize that I had that much passion. I was kind of just acting out on what was in my heart to do. I wasn't really thinking, I'm gonna show passion today. I'm gonna do all of these great, no, I was just being myself. So when someone showed me who I was without me actually accepting that part of myself, myself, it was hard to hear. And I was like, okay, nay, I don't want to keep living with pushing compliments away and pushing people away when they compliment me. And I also don't want to hide the passion that I have. Like, you can get through this. The same way you got through with people like pointing out your laugh and you're like, oh my gosh, my laugh is weird. That's the same way you're gonna get through this too. And I think maybe for you, maybe you're like, okay, that's a little bit odd. Like, A plus B does not equal C. Like, you had to speak, you did well, now you're running. Like, that doesn't quite make sense. And maybe that's not something that was your thing. It can look different for all of us. But we have to think, with any way that we act, it is either consciously or it's subconsciously. And the subconscious things are the ones that we want to be very, very, very aware of. Maybe for you, maybe it's like you notice that whenever somebody is crying in your presence, you tighten up and you actually want to run and leave the room. You feel so uncomfortable when you are in the presence of someone else that has deep emotions. Maybe that's you. A plus B also doesn't equal C in that situation. Somebody crying, me being in their presence, does not need to equal me wanting to run away. So that is what we want to see. Whenever there is something that doesn't line up, A, B doesn't equal C, A, B actually equals F, that's when you want to take very keen awareness, see what is actually happening here and why am I doing what I am doing. That is what self-awareness is about. Self-awareness is asking questions like, who am I? And what do I believe? And what am I thinking? And how do I feel? And what do I need right now? And what do I love to do? And what actually drains me? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Why did I react in that way? What patterns do I notice right now? There are so many things and so many questions that help us to understand more of ourselves so that we're not acting out on autopilot. If there is something that is happening that is limiting the way that we actually want to live in our lives, limiting our freedom and all of that, which we're going to talk about more next week in our week of healing core beliefs and doing all of this. But if there's something that's actually stopping us, we need to be aware of it first. That is foundational. We cannot intentionally heal what we're not already aware of. And that is what this journaling challenge is about. Now, if you're watching this way after the journaling challenge happened, do not worry. We are gonna have so many more opportunities like this. So don't worry, you can download my journaling guide in the meanwhile. But if you are here present at the time that we are doing our journaling challenge and you wanna know more about yourself, you also wanna heal core wounds and learn how to deepen relationships and all of these things, the journaling challenge is for you, and we would love to have you there. We're not just gonna talk about all of the things that are draining us, but also the things that bring us life. We wanna know the bad and the good things about ourselves so that we can live a life that is authentic and intentional and so full of freedom. Sign up at the link below. We are starting today. Drop some comments below to let me know how you are processing this self-awareness or why you might think it's important, or maybe some drawbacks, some struggles that you've had. I would love to interact with you guys there. And I will see you guys again very soon. Bye guys.